Hey guys, it's Matt here again, and today's video I would like to focus on Convict Love Tokens. These were a really interesting piece of collectible history in Australia, and they represent basically a love letter. So they were referred to commonly as leaden hearts, and these were the last things that were left by a lot of convicts heading over to Australia for their loved ones to remember them by. So generally you'll encounter two different types of these tokens. So you'll see slightly more rudimentary designs. So it'll just be the name, their age, generally the term that they're serving. So usually it was 7, 14, or a life sentence over in Australia. But the reality was for a lot of these convicts that it was basically a life sentence. Even once you received your ticket of leave, there wasn't a whole lot of scope to go back to England and make a name for yourself. So, which is why a lot of the convicts ended up staying in Australia and starting effectively a new life. So you got to think, if the person you love has been convicted of a crime, and bear in mind some of these crimes were things like stealing a loaf of bread or stealing a handkerchief in some cases, and these people are being sent halfway across the world to serve out their terms. It was pretty confronting stuff, I would have imagined. A lot of these guys were pretty young. When you look through the records, some of them were in their late teens and being shipped off. They were married and they were just being shipped off, and that was sort of it for them. And you couldn't, jump on the phone or shoot a text off to say, yeah, the ship arrived safely, all's well. It was kind of the last message that you were able to give someone that you loved. So the other type that you would often see is a little bit more decorative, a little bit more ornate, and these were usually commissioned. So the convict would have commissioned a jeweler or something like that to inscribe the message, as well as sometimes put in a little bit of imagery. A common motif that you would see would be shackles and chains and things like that, which was obviously a reflection of the sort of bleak circumstances they'd found themselves in. Another interesting thing about these tokens is they were actually illegal. So it was defacing Commonwealth currency, which is absolutely illegal. But given the circumstances, I don't think they were really too concerned about getting in trouble with the law, because things were already pretty grim. A really interesting resource for this type of information is the National Museum of Australia. They also hold the largest collection of these tokens. So we'll have a quick look now and take a look at one of the tokens that I think was quite interesting. Okay, so this token here was produced, well, it looks like it was produced by a gentleman by the name of Michael Lambert. A lot of this information has to be sort of extrapolated based on initials, timeframes, and just checking over all the records of the convicts and things like that. But a place like the museum is probably going to be reasonably accurate with this type of information. So this gentleman was only 19 years old when he was tried and convicted. So looks like he had some forged banknotes in his possession, and then was sentenced to 14 years. At the age of 19, sentenced to 14 years is pretty heavy stuff. And you can see the design here. It's pretty emblematic of most 19-year-olds. So he's got a gentleman here, looks like he's getting on the beers and smoking a massive pipe with a top hat. So the thing that you'll also notice is that he's in shackles down the bottom there. So it's pretty symbolic of, where you'd rather be versus your bleak future. He's also included the initials here. So his initials and the initials of what would have been his wife, and they had the same initials. So I imagine that would have made it a little easier to conclude who that relates to. And it looks like it was Mary Lambert. Like anything, the more information that you can get, the more valuable something becomes. And this website's actually a really good resource to look through. I've actually handled a couple of Convict Love tokens. Most of the ones that I've handled have been in the few $100s range. But certainly once you can attribute it to someone and get a bit of provenance behind it, they can get right up into the thousands. And these are actually a really interesting part of collecting.